The gentleman yields back. Ms. Bonamici, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to strike the last word.
Recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And before getting into my remarks, I'd like to remind my colleague, Mr. Bean from Florida, who just spoke, that far from being nuts, there are 119,300 borrowers in his district who would be denied relief if this resolution were enacted. And also, Madam Chair, I'd like to respond to claims that you made by the chairwoman that if enacted, HJ Res 45 would not retroactively affect payments that were paused from September to December of 2022. But I quote from a CRS report on congressional statements of disapproval under the CRA, quote, if a joint resolution of disapproval is submitted within the CRA specified deadline passed by Congress and signed by the President, the CRA states that the disapproved rule shall not take effect or continue. The rule would be deemed not to have had any effect at any time. Even provisions that had become effective would be retroactively negated. So it does, in fact, create the chaos of retroactive effect. So, Madam Chair, I strongly oppose this resolution. I've advocated for years for needed changes to the student loan system. That was true before the pandemic, but especially important in the aftermath, which brought sudden economic uncertainty to millions of borrowers. In fact, this student debt relief plan will help about 43 million Americans. More than a third of those, I note, are more than 40 years old. And I also want to align myself with the comments made by my colleagues that this Congress has bailed out industries. They've forgiven loan debt throughout the pandemic with PPP. As a parent, as a school volunteer for years, as an advocate for students, and as a policymaker, I know education is the best investment we can make to give everyone the opportunity to be successful in school and in life. There are many important issues in higher education we should be talking about instead of this resolution we're marking up. They're genuine issues on affordability. I'll note that the cost of higher education has almost tripled since I went to college and law school, and we need to reasonably and helpfully address that growing debt burden, particularly affecting borrowers of color. There's a lot we could and should be doing. We could crack down on predatory for-profit institutions that aggressively target low-income students and then overcharge and overpromise. I submit that we would benefit from discussing the decline of humanities, which is especially concerning at this time in our country when we desperately need more empathy and more ethics. We should also be working together to increase access to affordable, high-quality opportunities to get a higher education. We could be making needed reforms to the federal work-study program. We could be increasing Pell Grants and providing more flexibility. At the very least, let's allow students to refinance their loan balances at low interest rates. We could be marking up my bipartisan streamlining income-driven manageable payments on loans for education or Simple Act that will help prevent student loan defaults by automatically enrolling struggling borrowers in income-driven repayment plans so they can repay based on financial ability. There's a lot we can be doing to make higher education more affordable and accessible, but instead, the bill we're marking up today will hurt borrowers who desperately need relief. That's disappointing, and not just for me, but for the millions of Americans who are being held back by student loan debt. I urge my colleagues to vote no and defeat this resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. I recognize